Hey gang, so we've been talking about different methods for adding trails to video footage of prop spinning. Thus far, we've talked about a smartphone app called Luminancer as well as plugins that are available for Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro. So now things are going to get a little harder and more complex. That's because we're going to switch over to a number of different ways for producing trails inside of Adobe After Effects, which is a very, very powerful program for post-production film work. Our first method is actually pretty similar to the plugin that we used in Final Cut. In fact, they're more or less the same effect, but you'll have a bit more control over the outcome here in After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and first drop my footage into Final Cut and create a new composition with it. And, just like before, in the name of making my life easy, I'm going to go ahead and trim it down to just a few seconds here so that it doesn't take forever and a day to render. Cool. All right, now first things first, I am going to go ahead and duplicate this footage. So now I have two copies of the same footage. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is with the second copy of the footage right here, I'm going to go over here to the effects and presets, and I'm going to look up keying. And I'm going to copy over this effect right here, color key. Now, what this does is it's essentially going to take a single color and turn that color transparent in the video, right? So the color I'm going to pick is actually going to be black. And I am going to go ahead and change the color tolerance and the edge thin and edge feathering until I get a picture that is more or less only going to be the light sources in the footage. And what I want to try and do is I want to try and exclude pretty much everything other than the poi themselves, and I want to try and make sure that there's a light, airy edge to them rather than this really hard edge, because it's going to look really, really strange when I finish up this effect otherwise. Cool, so yeah, that looks more or less good to me. Cool. So now that I've done this, I'm going to go ahead and select the duplicate footage once again. Bear in mind, this original piece of footage, the one that's numbered 2, we are not going to touch again for the entire time that we're working with this footage. So on the duplicate right here, I'm going to make 8 more duplicates. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little bit here on our footage so that I can see how many frames I'm working with. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select our 9th copy, and I'm going to go ahead and edit the layer so that the opacity is 90%. That means that it is semi-transparent, yeah? I am also going to go ahead and shove it over a few frames. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 frames because why not? So this is great. Now we are going to have to repeat this operation on every other layer, but we're going to do it slightly differently each time. Imagine with each layer that comes after this one that the layer that came before it is just like the original piece of footage. Sound confusing? Let me explain. So this one that we just edited right quick, we put the opacity at 90%, we moved it over 2 frames. The one that is 8th in line, I'm going to go ahead and set the opacity to 80%. So where our 9th layer here is 10% less transparent, or 10% more transparent than the first layer, this 8th layer right here is now 10% more transparent than the layer that came before it. I'm also now going to move it over, and since the previous layer was moved over 2 frames, I'm going to move over 2 frames from that, so to 4 frames. Are you starting to see the pattern here? Go on up to the 7th layer here, and I'm going to set the opacity to 70%. So again, it is 10% more transparent than the layer that came before it. And now I'm going to move over the footage 6 frames instead of 4 because it's 2 frames past where the previous layer was. Likewise, our 6th layer to 60%, and it gets shoved over 8 frames. Our 5th layer here is at 50%, and we shove it over 10 frames. Our 4th layer is at 40%. We shove it over 12 frames. 3rd layer is at 30%. And we shove it over 14 frames. So hopefully by now you can get the pattern. I'm going to go ahead and complete this operation and come back to you guys in just 1 second after it's done. Cool, so I'm on the last layer right here, and something very special is going to happen when I edit this one. Namely, as I move it over here to the 20th frame, if I switch back here to see my composition, and I go ahead and move the slider over here, I am suddenly going to see all of these different echoes from my footage. So here's the reason for this. Essentially what we did is we created multiple transparent layers that have what happened in the previous frame, but moved it over several frames in order to more or less echo the effect that we were talking about. I was off on this last layer here. Whoops. Cool. So this, by and large, is essentially a manual version of the effect that we were looking at in After Effects. So, of course, the obvious question is, well, why would you do such a thing? Why, when the program can handle this for you? Well, the simple answer to that is that you can change which color it's responding to. So let me, actually, right quick, I will play some of this footage for you so you can see it in action. Nice. And let me do a round of this with some daytime footage to show you what it will wind up looking like. Okay, so this represents a small improvement over what we were able to do in Final Cut. There's less in the way of trails coming off of the body, even though the hands are still a notable problem, as are my pants and my face, but at least it's smaller and more manageable. You can tweak around with whatever color you're keying, and of course the preferences on the edge thin and feather and color tolerance and everything, and see if it will give you something that looks a little bit better than this. In our next video, we're going to cover how we can start to use some of After Effects' more powerful tools for analyzing video to create what's called a motion tracker and help us create our trails. Thanks so much for watching and enjoy the flow. Peace. Hey guys, so this series exists for one reason and one reason only, and that is the amazing support of my backers on Patreon. They have been allowing me to tackle more ambitious topics like this one and to create long series rather than just having to do one-off videos. And it's been totally awesome. So if you're getting anything out of these series, then please hop on over to patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi and sign up to support them. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month, and that little bit of support helps so much in being able to create these pieces of knowledge to put out there to the wider flow arts community. So for those of you guys already on Patreon, thank you so much for enabling me to do this work. And for those of you guys out there watching, thank you for tuning in as well.